All right, so our project was on the Canadian Football League. We had four members: Tyler Hickman, Taylor Wethington, myself, Tyler Commissar.
And Jacob Janone.
All right, so a little bit about the history of the Canadian Football League. It's kind of just sort of jumbled up. It's really been known by a few different names over time. It started back in the 1800s as the Canadian Rugby Football Union, and then was renamed to the Canadian Rugby Union. And in the early 1900s, the Grey Cup was adopted, which is sort of the Super Bowl of the Canadian Football League. It's the championship trophy that's given out every year. And then in 1986, the CAFA adopted Football Canada as their marketing name. And more recently, in 2004, the CFL became a member of the International Federation of American Football. So a lot of history, but really it's sort of been the same league for a while, and they've just kind of gone by different names and been ran by different organizations. The competition, it's sort of been a little skewed. Three of the teams have won over half the championships over the past 60 or 70 years, with Toronto, Edmonton, and Winnipeg winning over 40 championships in that time. Which, I mean, three teams, it is kind of a third of the league. If you were to say a third of the league in some of the bigger professional sports leagues, like the MLB or something, that'd be 10 or 11 teams. So I think part of the reason for that domination is just because this league is so small. There's only nine teams. So the fact that three of them have half, it seems, I guess, a little more dominant than it really is, because that is, a third of the teams that are there. But there is sort of somewhat domination by those three teams, as the lower teams, the bottom three or four teams, don't even have that many combined. But as far as sports in Canada goes, the CFL is the second most popular behind the NHL. The NHL actually has seven teams in Canada, which there's 31 teams in the NHL. So they have almost as many NHL teams as they do CFL teams. But those two leagues don't really overlap. The NHL starts in the fall and ends sort of early spring, whereas the CFL starts in the summer and then ends in the late fall. But there is some competition with MLB. The Toronto Blue Jays, for instance, are in Canada, and they play both during the summer. So there is some competition in that, but it is one of the more popular sports leagues in Canada, and it is the only professional football league in Canada. As far as how the season is structured, there's a 3-week preseason where each team plays two games. Each team plays 18 regular season games, two against every team, and then a third game against two of the teams that rotates every year. Either each team gets 2 points for a win, 1 point for a tie, and the playoffs start mid-November. So you take the top three teams from each division. The top one gets a bye, and the other two play, and then the winners play in the divisional championship, and then the Grey Cup is, like I said, like the Super Bowl of the CFL. But that is kind of sort of skewed, I guess, a little bit, because three teams from each division, but the East Division only has four teams, where the West has five. So I guess it's better off to be in the East, because you got a 3 out of 4 chance to make it to the playoffs at least. And the playoffs is only single elimination, so I guess that kind of helps. Teams only have to win 2 or 3 games to win the Grey Cup, but it is competitive. So as far as the teams go, and the names in the East, we got Hamilton, Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. And in the West, British Columbia, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg. So there are 9 teams, but they're actually, I've read some articles about them considering adding a 10th team. I don't know exactly where that's going to be. It is going to be sort of on the East Coast, and the team has been named, at least potentially, the Atlantic Schooners. I read some articles about that team joining the league in the next 2 or 3 years, but with everything that's going on right now, I'm not really sure. I haven't seen many really recent articles about it, but that's what they're hoping for. And as far as franchises go, franchises, they get to pick their own ticket prices and player salaries, as long as it's under the salary cap, and how that each franchise is owned. Three or four of them are publicly owned, so you can actually buy shares of the team, or some of them are owned by private groups or organizations. So it's really, there's a lot of, I guess, leniency in how the franchises can run, but the league as a whole does decide the salary cap and where exactly each team can be located and how many teams are in the league. So, obviously the league's going to have its general rules and guidelines, but each team does have, I guess, of, somewhat flexibility on how they want to price their tickets, depending on how good their team is or how popular that team is in the region and how much they want to pay their players. So for revenues, it was a little difficult to find some of the information about revenues, but some of the sources obviously are gate revenues from ticket sales, the concessions, apparel, so selling team gear, and then, broadcasting and advertisements. So broadcasting and merchandise is split evenly among the teams, but the home team does get to keep all the gate revenue and concessions. So that kind of helps out, but each team's going to play 9 home games and 9 away games. So that sort of evens out, but it does give the more popular teams a little bit of an advantage as far as profits go, because if they're selling, more tickets to their home games than other teams, then they'll make more revenue off of that. The salary cap, it was a little hard to find. The average salary in 2018 was 113,000, which is pretty good, but can be compared to like the NFL or some of the more popular football leagues, that's really nothing. Salary cap per team in the coming season is only 5.3 million, which is pretty low when you think about it. I mean, maybe not for Canada, but as far as the U.S. goes and some of the NFL, NBA, individual players are paid more than that. So it is pretty low, but, the league is not like super profitable. So that's really all they can afford, at least per team. And players are only getting a certain share of the revenues that the team even makes, and which is usually less. It's far less of a percentage than players get in the NFL and some of the American sports leagues. But the salary cap is what it is for a reason. The league set it to try to help make competition even. And yeah, so as far as ticket pricing goes,
When it comes to ticket pricing in the CFL, we found that the price range seems to be from around $25 to $150. A couple of variables play into that, though, such as the matchup and the seat location. The closer you are to the field, the closer to the middle of the field you are, the higher the price will be. And then when it comes to the Grey Cup, there is an expected increase in ticket prices just because that is the Super Bowl of the CFL. Onto the labor market. Player contracts have to be negotiated between a team and a CFL PA licensed agent. When the CFL first started, players were given to teams within their territory or their region. So that kind of went away recently. They happened to adapt a draft similar to the NFL and NBA's, to where teams are slotted based off of their previous record that season. They did bring back the territory rule somewhat in 2019, to where the bottom 2 teams can have a pick of any player within that territory, which seems to help the competitive advantage a little bit. Onto player compensation. When it comes to revenue sharing in the CFL, players receive far less than they could in other leagues at 22.3%. The highest paid player in the CFL is Mike Riley, whose contract is over 4 years and brings in about $3 million over that span. When it comes to discrimination in the CFL, they were way ahead of the curve when it came to other leagues such as MLB, NFL, especially the NFL for that matter. They signed their first African-American player, being Robert Stonewall Jackson, to the Saskatchewan Roughriders in 1930. Which was very advanced for that time. One of the big issues facing the CFL is the loss of fan interest. There's been a noticeable decline in overall willingness of fans to pay any interest towards the Canadian Football League. They blame the loss of fan interest on millennials due to them being more conscious and having more alternatives, which allows them to put their money elsewhere. At this moment, the CFL is trying to address that issue by rebranding and trying to reach out to that target audience. Only time will tell how that works out for them in the long run, but it'll be exciting to see. So post COVID-19, they have played this like other leagues such as the NBA. They postponed their season until more information is known about the virus and whether they can relax those social distancing rules. At this moment, they're going to hope to start the season during the summer. That is an optimistic guess on when they'll restart it, but everyone is hoping that they are able to. The current issues facing the CFL is really just the loss of fan interest. Safety has been a big issue among the players, officiating, and the quality of play on the field. The quality of play could be in turn due to the lack of revenue that is shared with the players being only 22%. If players were compensated more, they may be more inclined to play well and to put a better show on the field. And all of those are necessary in order to keep a league afloat. So hopefully the CFL and the Canadian Football League is able to find a solution to those problems. And that concludes our presentation over the Canadian Football League. Thank you very much.